arrangement so you can hopefully see this
Fantastic.
quite well.
Yeah.
So pleased that you are joining us tonight. So the first hour is going to be the foundation paper for your final GCSE paper, and then the following hour after that it will be higher. So myself and Miss Miller are going to be doing the foundation one, and then Mr. Sanders and Mr. Starkey, I believe, are going to be doing the high one. So the first thing we're going to have a look at, which hasn't come up yet, is the nth term. So here is the first 5 terms in a sequence. So straight away I'll be thinking, well, what is it going up in? So I can see straight away it's going up by adding on 3. So find the 10th term. So I've got the first one, the second one, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Okay, so the 6th one I would be adding on 3, so that would be 22. The 7th one, that would be 25. The 8th one would be 28. The 9th one would be 31. And therefore the 10th one would be 33. So the answer would be 33. Write an expression in terms of n for the nth term of this sequence. So that means that I could find any term within the sequence. So the first thing I need to think about is what's the difference? Well, it's going up in 3s, therefore I know it is the 3 times table. So it is going to be 3n. However, it clearly has been changed. It's not the 3 times table because the 3 times table starts with 6. So 6 has gone to 7. How do you go? Sorry, 3 to 7. The first one is 3. So you would add on 4. So the nth term would be 3n plus 4. Right, the next one we are going to have a look at is rearranging an equation, which again, these ones, a calculator hasn't really been used at the minute, but that's okay. So at the minute we have got Q, and we need to rearrange this to make R the subject to the equation. So I somehow need to deal with this 4, and I need to deal with this negative P. Well, I'm going to deal with this negative P first, and I want to take this to 0. So how do I take it to 0? I add on P, which will therefore cancel it out. But whatever I do to one side, I need to do the same to the opposite side. And then I'm going to do a line to show that that's one stage of my calculation. I'm then going to rewrite it. So 4R equals Q plus P. I don't want to know what 4R is though, I want to know what 1R is. So how do I get rid of this and take it to 0? I divide it by 4. But whatever I do to one side, I need to do the same to the opposite side. Therefore, R equals Q plus P divided by 4. The next one that could possibly come up might be a translation. So this is one here. So we've got different types of translations, which we are going to be having a look at tonight. This is one particular type of translation. And this one is about thinking about moving it with a vector. So the top number in a vector tells you which way it's going to be moving on the x-axis, and the bottom number tells you which way it's going to be moving on the y-axis. Now, because the top number is 0, that doesn't actually mean it's going to move on the x-axis. It's not going to move in a positive or a negative direction. But I've got a positive 4 on the y, which means it's going to be moving up 4. So I would take each one of these points and move it up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I would then get my ruler, which I'm not going to do to save a bit of time, but you must do in the exam, and join it up. And therefore I have now translated the shape by the vector 0, 4. Another kind that you could possibly have is a rotation. So this one here, I do think this is quite a nice question, so it'd be great if it comes up like this, but I might be expecting it a little bit harder. I do think this one's a nice one because it's told you it's been rotated. Okay, so here are 2 flags. So I've got flag F and flag G. Flag F is rotated to flag G. Now that's absolutely crucial, and I would really highlight that in the exam. So I'm going from this one to this one because that will make a difference to your answer. Describe the rotation fully. So when we do a rotation, we need to think about which direction it's going in. So because it's gone from F to G, it's going to be going in a clockwise direction. And you also need to think about how many degrees it's been rotated. It's usually quite nice, and I do think this one is really nice because it's just 90 degrees, so it's been rotated clockwise 90 degrees. And you also need to put about the centre at which it's been rotated, which people do usually forget, but we're not going to tonight. And the centre of rotation is quite nicely here. So what's the coordinate for this one here? Well, you do your x coordinate first, which is 3, and then your y coordinate, so it's 3, 1. if you do get stuck on a question like this in your exam, it might be nice to use a piece of tracing paper and trial and error and put your pen on it and then move it. And if it doesn't work, you can try it again to find your centre of rotation. This is another type of one that you could have as well, which is an enlargement. Now, if we have a look here, describe fully the single transformation that maps triangle A to triangle B. We have a look. So the first thing, again, I would reread the question. Are we going from B to A, or are we going from A to B? Because that will make a big difference. Now here, we're going from triangle A to triangle B. Okay, so I can see we're going from the bigger one to the smaller one. So straight away, that tells me that's going to be a fractional enlargement. So the enlargement is a bit of a tricky word there because we're not actually getting any bigger, we're getting smaller. So I can see it's gone from 3 squares to 1 square. So I know it's got a third of, it's gone down, it's a third of the size. So the enlargement is going to be a third. So it's going to be an enlargement, but then you need to know where the centre of the enlargement is. Now to do that, you have to get your ruler. I can't really do this freehand. And what you need to do is you need to join all the corresponding points up on the shape. And what you will hopefully find, and I'm sure you will do, is that they all come together around a point. And the point, which is quite clearly here, is going to be 0, 0 for this one. So it's been enlarged with a scale factor of a third around the centre of 0, 0. Right, the next one that we're going to do is going to be a percentage increase question. And you do get a calculator for this paper, so I'm going to bring it in because I'm going to be using this one. So we're selling some ice cream. One day she sells 80 ice creams. The next day she sells 108 ice creams. Work out the percentage increase in the number of ice creams she sells. So I know we've gone from 80 to 108. So the first thing I do is I do what's the difference. So we do 108 take away 80, which gives us 28. So I know she's gone up by 28. So now I need to know what proportion this is of the original ice creams. Okay, so one day she sells 80 ice creams, so it's going to be 28 out of 80. But I'm going to turn it into a percentage, so I'm going to multiply it by 100. So it's going to be 28 divided by 80 times by 100, so it's 35%. So she has gone up by 35% the following day, which is a quite remarkable increase in sales. Right, the next one, kind of flip into a completely different skill now. Hopefully a skill that you can quite relate to because it should come up in your science exam as well. So we've got a diagram here showing a distance time graph. So how far from Bristol is Anne at 8 o'clock in the morning? So I'd have a look, we've got time along the bottom. I would go to 8 o'clock. I would then get my ruler and draw a line up just to be absolutely sure I'm going to be reading the scale accurately. And I know we're going from 0 to 20 and it's exactly halfway between, which I know is 10. Therefore, she must have travelled 10 miles from Bristol. Describe what is happening between 9 and 9:30. Well, I've got 9 and 9:30 here. Well, the distance isn't actually changing. So what must have happened? She must have stopped travelling. Work out Anne's speed for the first 2 hours of her journey. Well, I know she's started off at 7, she's then going to 9, and in that time she's travelled 20 miles. So speed equals distance divided by time, and the distance is 20. The time is 2, so 20 divided by 2 is 10 miles per hour. So again, this question has been quite nice because it has given the units, but please make sure if it doesn't give the units, then make sure you do include those there. Right, this is a graph still, but of a completely different scale, and this is going to be a frequency polygon. Now, frequency polygons are generally quite easy to plot. The only bit that's a little bit tricky about this question is that you've actually got a range, and because we've got a range, we don't actually know this frequency of 7 here. We don't know, does it lie right at this towards a 0 or towards a 10? Now we can't possibly know that without getting the information, so what we do is we have to make an assumption. Now the assumption we're going to use is we're going to use the midpoint. So the midpoint between 0 and 10 is 5, which is going to be here on the graph, so I'm going to plot that as 7. The midpoint between 10 and 20 is 15, and that's 25. 20 and 30 is 25, which is 38. 30 and 40 is 16. And 40 and 50 is 45, which is 12. And then I would need to get my ruler and join the points on. Obviously, you should be doing this with your pencil. And there you've got a frequency polygon. The next one, which hasn't been on yet, and I would definitely think it will be on, is standard form. So write this number in standard form. Now, this is an ordinary number, and the first thing I think about is what is standard form. So for standard form, we've got to have a number multiplied by 10 to the power of something. Now, because this is a very small number, then it's going to be a negative power. And I know for standard form that the number's got to be between 1 and 10. So where could I move the decimal point? Well, if I move it one place, that wouldn't have a number between 1 and 10. I'd have to move it again and again and again and again. Okay, and that would give me 4.5. So 4.5 is between 1 and 10. And how many times have I had to multiply it by 10 to get to this? I've had to multiply it once, twice, 3, 4, 5. So I've had to move it 5 times. So this in standard form would be 4.5 times 10 to the power of 5. Again, another nice question which hasn't come up yet, and I definitely think will be coming up at some point, is a number x is rounded to 2 decimal places. The result is 0.39. Write down the error interval for x. So I know that the number's got to be x, and because it's been rounded to 2 decimal places, it must have started off at 3 decimal places. So what's the smallest value it could be? Well, it could have been 0.385. So x has got to be greater than, or it could be equal to 0.385. However, we know that x has got to be less than 0.395. It cannot be equal to this, or otherwise it would have been taken up to 0.3. It would have been taken up to 0.4. Right, bearings. Again, another topic which isn't answered particularly well. So if you can do this kind of question, that would be fantastic in the exam. So the diagram shows the position of 2 aeroplanes P and Q. The bearing from Q to P is 0.070. So please remember that a bearing has to be 3 digits. So if you have to measure an angle that's only becomes 2 digits, like 70, you do need to put that 0 in front of it. Calculate the bearing of P from Q. So we're thinking about this bearing here. So we're travelling from Q to P, and we always go in a clockwise direction for bearing. So we're trying to work out that one there. Now there's a key bit here which says this diagram is not drawn accurately. So unfortunately getting a protractor here wouldn't actually help us. So I need to think about my angle rules. Now I know that co-interior angles have got to add up to 180. So if this is 70, I would therefore do 180, take away 70, which would give me 110. So therefore, I know that this angle here must be 110 degrees. Now, I know that angles around a point must add up to 360. So if I do 360, take away 110, it must leave me with this angle here, which is 250 degrees. So the bearing from P to Q therefore must be 250 degrees. I just use a bit of common sense. Does it look about 250 degrees? Yes, it does. That kind of seems to make sense. Right, the next one is probability. So Andy sometimes gets a lift to and from college. When he does not get a lift, he walks. The probability that he gets a lift to college is 0.4, and the probability that he walks home from college is 0.7. So I can use this because I know that the chances of everything happening has got to add up to 1. Probability has to add up to 1. So therefore, as this is 0.4, then this, therefore, has got to be 0.6. I know that if this one is 0.7, I know that this has therefore got to be 0.3. I can also use these probabilities to have the same probability here. So to get a lift home has got to be the same here. So this is going to be 0.3. And to get a lift, to walk home has got to be the same as this one here. So this is going to therefore be 0.7. So calculate the probability that Andy gets a lift to college and walks home from college. So we're wanting and. So he wants to get a lift to college and walk home from college. So if he gets a lift, that's going to be 0.4. And because you want two events to happen, you need to multiply them. And then he wants to walk home from college. So if he's going to walk, it's 0.7. Sorry, my pen seems to be running out. So 0.4 times by 0.7, you can get a calculator. That's going to be 0.28. Calculate the probability that Andy does not get a lift to or from college. So if he does not get a lift, then he must have to walk. He could either walk and then get a lift home, or he could get a lift and then walk. So you would need to work out each of those individual probabilities. So we could have 0.6 multiplied, so he could walk and then get a lift. Sorry, I'm misreading the question here. So the probability that Andy does not get a lift to or from college is going to be that he walks and then walks. So we're just going to multiply those together. So it's going to be 0.6 times 0.7, which is going to be 0.42. Right, next we're going to have a go at some simultaneous equations. I'm going to try and use a different pen, which will hopefully be better. So simultaneous equations are difficult questions. They are grade 5. They will appear towards the end of the paper. They are big mark questions. And if you can even attempt at having a go and trying to eliminate one variable, that will be absolutely fantastic for you. So the first thing I would do here is I would think about which one I'm going to eliminate. So I think I'm going to think about eliminating the x because I can just double this. I don't really have to do anything to this equation here. I can just double this one. So I'm going to multiply this one by 2. So 4x multiplied by 2 is going to be 4x. Minus 3y multiplied by 2 is going to be minus 6y. And 15 multiplied by 2 is going to be 30. I'm then going to think about how can I eliminate these. So I'm going to write the previous one above. So this is equation number 1 here. So I've not done anything to it. I've just written it above. And I know if I subtract these two equations from each other, then it's going to eliminate because 4x take away 4x is 0. So I've eliminated the x's from these equations. So I'm going to subtract this. So 4x take away 4x is 0. I've got minus 2y, and I'm just going to write this out separately here so you can see this because it is quite difficult here. So I've got minus 2y, and I'm going to take away negative 6y. Now we do need to remember that when we've got two negatives together, when you're subtracting a negative, you're actually going to be adding them. So negative 2y take away negative 6y is actually going to be positive 4y. And then I've got 8, which is going to be negative 12. I don't want to know what 4y is, I want to know what 1y is. Therefore, I'm going to divide it by 4, and I know that negative 12 divided by positive 4, so y is going to equal negative 3. So I now know what one of the variables is. I can then pick one of these equations to substitute it back in to then find out what x is. I have, at the minute though, still picked up quite a lot of marks. It doesn't matter which one you pick to substitute it in. So I think I'm going to pick this one. So I've got 2x, and then I've got negative 3. So I've got negative 3 multiplied by negative 3, and a negative multiplied by a negative is going to give you positive 9. So I've got 2x plus 9 equals 15. to get rid of this 9, because I want to take it to 0, I'm going to subtract 9, and therefore I'm going to subtract 9 off the opposite side. Okay, so 15 subtract 9, so 2x is going to equal 6. I'm going to divide it by 2 to find out what 1x is, so x has got to equal positive 3. So my final answer is y equals negative 3, x equals positive 3. And that's simultaneous equations. Right, moving on to a slightly easier topic now is expanding brackets. So we've got to expand and simplify. Now there's different ways to do this. I'm going to do it with a grid method just because I think quite a lot of you tend to use that. But there are loads of different ways and I'm sure you'll get the same answer. So I'm going to draw my grid here. I'm going to split it up into 4. And I'm going to put this bracket along the top. So I've got x plus 3 and then I've got x negative 1. And what I'm going to do is to find what goes inside each of these boxes, I'm going to multiply them together. So x multiplied by x is x squared. X multiplied by 3 is positive 3x. Minus 1 multiplied by x is minus 1x or minus x. And minus 1 multiplied by positive 3 is negative 3. So I've got this, but I do need to collect because I need to simplify. So which ones are my like terms? Well, x squared, I haven't got any other x squared, so I can just write that out. I've got positive 3x, and I'm subtracting one of the x's, so that's going to be positive 2x. And then negative 3, I haven't got any other like terms, so it is just negative 3. So your final answer would be x squared plus 2x negative 3. Right, so this is a quadratic and what we are being asked to solve it. Now, to solve this one, there's two different ways you can solve a quadratic. One of them is by plotting it and look at where it crosses the x-axis, but because I've not been given any graph paper, I don't think that's really going to be applicable here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it by factorising it. Now, two questions that you need to ask yourself when you are factorising. You need to ask yourself your highest common factor and if there is a common letter. Now, the highest common factor here, because we've got 20, 12 and 1, the highest common factor is going to be 1. And there is no common letter. Therefore, this clarifies that it is definitely a quadratic and therefore I am going to need to have 2 brackets. So, x squared, what do I need to multiply together to get x squared? Well, I know that there must be an x and an x at the start of my bracket. Now, I can look at this number next, but that does make it a little bit more complicated. So it is easier if you look at the end number. So if we do a side bit here, and we need to think about the factors of 20, and it is much easier if you think about this in pairs. So what are two numbers that can multiply together to make 20? So we've got 5 and 4, we've got 20 and 1, and we've got 2 and 10. So those are the factors. So I know that one of these pairs is going to go in these brackets here, but which one? Well, this is where we look at the middle number, okay? And I want to get to 12. So which one of these pairs can I either add or subtract to get to 12? Well, 5 and 4, I can't really see any way to get to 12 with those. 20 and 1, again, I can't really see any way to get to 12 with those. 2 and 10, I can definitely get to 12 with those. But it's not positive 12, it's negative 12. So to get to negative 12 with 10 and 2, it's got to be x negative 2, x negative 10. And I would just double check that this actually works when you expand it back out. So x times x is x squared. And then I would have negative 2x, negative 10x to give me the negative 12x. And negative 2 multiplied by negative 10 will give you positive 20. So yes, it works. However, I've not actually answered the question yet, which is to solve it. So I want to know what x actually is. Because the shape of the quadratic, x always has 2 values. So each one of these brackets is equal to 0. So x negative 2 is equal to 0. And x negative, sorry, that's not an equal sign. X negative 10 is also equal to 0. Now I don't want to know what x negative 2 equal to 0 is. I want to know what 1x is. So how do I cancel out this negative 2? I add on 2 and add on 2. So x has got to equal positive 2. What would I do to this one? I would add on 10, add on 10. So x is equal to either positive 2 or x is equal to positive 10. So when you're solving a quadratic, you either need to plot it and look at where it crosses the x-axis, or you can factorise it into your double brackets and then put it equal to 10, solve it that way. Fantastic question if you can get that one right. Okay, so the next one is we are having a look at, so this one we're going to be thinking about multipliers. So the value of a second-hand car is £8,000. Each year it loses 20% of its value at the start of the year. Work out the value in 5 years' time. Now I'm definitely going to be using my calculator for this one, so I'm going to be bringing it in. So the key thing I think you need to think about here is it loses its value. And another word it could use here is depreciate. So if it does say it depreciates, it means it goes down in value. So I know, if I just draw a quick bar model, my class will know that I love these. So if this is equal to 100%, I've actually had 20% taken off. So what must be left? It must be 80% that is left. So I know actually I'm trying to find 80%. So what is my multiplier for 80%? I divide it by 100 to get my multiplier. So my multiplier is 0.8. So we know that the car starts off at £8,000. And this, it loses 20% every year for 5 years. So I'm going to find 0.8, but because it's for 5 years, it's 0.8 to the power of 5. So I then get my calculator and I would do 8,000 times 0.8, and I'm going to use this button here so I can have any power, to the power of 5 equals, and it's given me it as a fraction, but I don't want a fraction, so I'm going to press the SD button to convert it, and it gives me a final answer of £2,621.44. So after 5 years' time, that's how much the car's going to be worth after losing 20% every year. Okay, the next one we're going to be having a look at is a bit of trigonometry. So if we have a look at this one, in fact, I think we'll start off with this one first. So Pythagoras did come up on the last paper, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to come up again. There hasn't really been any trigonometry on yet, so we definitely think this is going to come up. So the first thing I think is, I'd say I've got a right angle triangle. This is quite a nice basic question, and I probably don't expect it to come up like this. I would expect it to be in some sort of context, maybe a ladder up against a wall, something like that, so but look out for it. The point is, you've got this nice right angle triangle. So because it's a right angle triangle, it could be Pythagoras or it could be trigonometry. And the bit that tells you which way to think about it is the fact that we've been given another angle. So I've got 40 degrees here. So I know that I'm going to be using trigonometry. So the first thing I would do is I'd write down my trig ratios so that I know which ones I'm using. And the next thing I would do is I would label the sides of my triangle. Now it is always best to do it in the order of H first. Now you know H stands for hypotenuse, which is the longest side, and you can't always tell which one the longest side is. But the other thing you know about the hypotenuse is it's across from the right angle. So because the right angle's here, I know that this side must be the longest one, which is hypotenuse, so I'm going to label it H. I'm then going to label the opposite one, which is opposite the angle that you've been given. So this is the angle here, so therefore this one must be O, and then this leaves this one, which must be A. So I've labelled the sides of my triangle, which is absolutely crucial. I now need to work out which trig ratio I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using sine, cos or tan. Now for this you need to think about, well, the question tells you which one to use. So if we have a look, I'm going to be using, I'm trying to find O, so I'm going to circle it because we're definitely going to be using that one. And I've actually been told A. So I know for a fact we're definitely going to be using that one as well. So which trig ratio uses O and A? Well, it's going to be tan. So that's the one that I'm going to be using. So I know that tan of 40 equals opposite, which is y, over adjacent, which is 37. However, I need to rearrange it here to find y. So what would I do? I'd multiply it by 37 and I'd multiply it by 37. So tan of 40 multiplied by 37 equals y. You would need to get your calculator at this point. So tan of 40, close your bracket, multiplied it by 37 equals, and then I've got an answer here. I'm going to take it to one decimal place, which would still be 31 centimetres. And then just use a little bit of common sense. Does that seem about right? Well, if this is 37, yes, that looks about right, so it looks to fit. If you do make a mistake here with rearranging the equation and you happen to do tan divided by 37, you would get a bit of a silly answer. So hopefully you can use a little bit of common sense there to see that that wouldn't be the case. So that is trigonometry to find a length of a side. You can, however, also use trigonometry to find the size of an angle, which is what we're going to do here. So again, we've got a nice right angle triangle. I know we're using trigonometry because we've got another angle that's been brought into the question, so it's not going to be Pythagoras. I would write down my trig values. Okay, first thing I need to do, label the sides of my triangle. Now I know that the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, so this is going to be H. The opposite is opposite the angle that you've been given, so this is going to be O, and therefore this side is going to be A. Now which ones have been brought into the question? H has been brought in, so I'm going to circle it, and A has been brought in. So which trig ratio uses the hypotenuse and the adjacent? It's going to be cos. So cos of x equals your adjacent over your hypotenuse. So again, you would need to bring your calculator in at this point. Now, because I'm trying to find an angle, I need to actually use cos to the power of -1. Now, to get that, I now need to press the shift button, and it opens up your brackets, and then there's different ways to do it. I know some people use the fractions button. Personally, I just do 8 divided by 11, close my brackets, press equals, and we get 1. I'm going to do this to one decimal place. So this would be 43.3 degrees. Does that angle look about 43? Well, if this is a right angle, yep, it looks about right. Again, if you made a little mistake here and maybe did 11 divided by 8, you would get an angle which wouldn't quite make sense. So with trig, it is always nice to use a bit of common sense and see, does it kind of fit with the question? So I'm not sure what's happening. Is Miss Milner taking over now, or is she, I think, she's stepping up, guys. She's stepping up. Get ready for the Villa jokes, everybody.
No, not anymore.
Oh, she's not doing any more. We don't talk about Villa anymore. We're not allowed to. I think she's going to be doing, the first thing she's going to be doing with estimating the mean, which in my personal opinion, I think is definitely going to be coming on. So I would really, really pay attention.
Okay, so first of all, estimating the mean. It's called estimating the mean because, like with the frequency polygon question before, the data's been grouped, okay? So we don't know exactly the speed of each of these cars. So what we do is we just use an estimate, and that's where the estimate part comes in on this question. And the most sensible amount to use would be the midpoint. Okay, so I'm just going to label this column with midpoint. I've just drawn these columns on, okay, they weren't there before. So if we just take the midpoint 0 and 20, that's 10, 20 and 40 is 30, 40 and 60 is 50, 60 and 80 is 70, 80 and 100 is 90, and then we've got 110. Now, it's saying that we've got 6 cars that went at 10 kilometres per hour. So if I were to add all of these values together, 6 lots of 10 is 60. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm multiplying the midpoint with the frequency. Okay, here we've got 30 multiplied by 17, which will give us 510. Here we've got 29 multiplied by 50, which will give us 1,450. 70 multiplied by 25, I'm giving up now, I'm just doing it with a calculator, is 1,750, 1,800 and 330, okay? And then what I need to do to work out an estimate of the mean, when we find the mean, we add all the values together and divide by how many there are. So I know that the total number of cars, it tells me in the question anyway, is 100, but if not, then I'd add up the frequency and work out that it was 100. And I need to find the total of this column here. So I'm just going to quickly add all of these together. So 60 plus 510 plus 1,450 plus 1,750 plus 1,800 plus 330 is 5,900. Okay, so when I add them all up, I'm going to divide by how many there are. So 5,900 divided by 100 is 59. Okay, and the estimate part for that comes in when we're using the midpoints. Okay, so you don't need to round anything here. The question also then asks us to write down the class interval that contains the median. Okay, so this would be the middle value if we put all of these in an order. Okay, now there's 100. So if I added 1 to that to find the middle, 101 divided by 2 would be 50.5. So my middle car would be between the 50th and the 51st. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep a running total with my frequencies. So down to here I've got 6 cars. Then down to here, because I've got another 17, that's a total of 23 cars. So imagine we're putting them in order. This next group has 29, so that takes me down to 52. So the 50th, or the median car, is in this group here, which is 40 to 60. And that is the interval that contains the median. If it said what was the modal class interval, that just means what was the most common speed for cars to be travelling. So if it asked for the modal, 29 is the highest frequency, so I'd write my data from there, which again was 40 to 60. Okay, next up we're going to have a couple of Venn diagram questions. Okay, so it says 50 students are asked if they studied geography or history. The Venn diagram shows information about their answers. And first of all, it asks us, what does the number 7 on the diagram represent? Well, this section here is the intersection, and any values that are in here, this represents 7 people, and it's 7 people who study both geography and history. Okay, so the number 7 represents the number of people who study geography and history. I'm really slow at writing. Okay, the next part of the question says 20 students study geography but not history. That's really important. So that 20 there, because they study geography and not history, I'm going to write 20 in the geography side. The next part says 19 students study history. Now this whole circle here is the set of students who study history. So because I've already got 7 in the intersection, I actually have to calculate 19 minus 7, which is 12. Okay, so the whole set there sums to 19, but actually 12 study just history, with 7 studying both. And then complete the diagram. Now I've still got a number that I need to put here, because I'm told in the question that 50 students are asked. So I've got 20, 12 and 7, and when I add them up together I get 39. And I know it's got to sum to 50, so 50 minus 39, that means 11 study neither geography or history. So another Venn diagram question. This is just slightly different, and the reason that I've chosen this one is because it's talking about probability. So if we've got a P in front of the bracket, that means it wants us to work out the probability. Now this says work out the probability that it is in A union B, and what that means is that it can be in A, or it can be, or it can be in B, or it can be in the intersection. So it's all of the sets. Okay, so the only thing that it's excluding is values that aren't in either. Okay, so 1 to 11, so I know that there's 11 values in total, and I know that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 that are in the set A union B. This next question says work out the probability that it is the complement of B, and it's really important that you spot this apostrophe here. and that means the complement of B, or what that actually means is not B. Okay, so I'm going to use a highlighter, and I'm just going to shade that bit in. Because this circle is B, I'm looking for everything that isn't in there. Okay, and it's really important that doesn't include the intersection, just this side of it, because all of that circle belongs to B. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 values. So 7, because I'm writing the probability, it needs to be out of 11. Right, next up, got another triangle question, okay? And this question is asking me to work out the length of EC. Okay, now EC is this length here. I know that this whole length is 12, but I need to find this length here. Now this is a similar triangles question. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to separate this out. So I've got one triangle there, which is triangle ADE. And then what I've also got is a larger triangle, okay? So it's really important to see that this is a larger triangle. Okay, I know that some people get confused and just draw the trapezium. So if I draw this triangle out as well, and this is the triangle ABC. Now I'm just going to fill in the lengths that I've been given. So I know that this height is 4, and I know that this height of BC is 10. I also know that the length of triangle ABC is 12. And what I need to do is I need to find just this part. So because I've got a corresponding side here that I don't know, I'm going to find that one. Okay, now you can use a double number line for this if you like. All right, so this is, I'm going to just call it triangle 1 and triangle 2. Now I know that the length of this one is 4, and I know that the length of that one is 10. So those are my corresponding sides. So I know that I'm multiplying by 2.5. So here I know that this side is 12, and I need to find this value. So I'm going to do the inverse calculation, and I'm going to divide by 2.5. And when I do 12 divided by 2.5, that gives me 4.8. Okay, so I know that that length there is 4.8. However, I've not quite completed the question because I wanted to know this length here. So to finish this off, I'm going to do 12 minus 4.8, and that gives me 7.2 centimetres. So that missing length there is 7.2 centimetres. Right, next up, we're going to look again at a couple of compound interest problems. So the first one that we've got here, it says Charlie invests £2,500 for 3 years in a savings account. She gets 3% per annum compound interest. Now we're going to use multipliers for this, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to use the calculation that we take our investment or our original value and we multiply it by the multiplier, okay? And we do this to the given number of years. So in this case, we've got 2,500 and I need to work out my multiplier. Now, because it's 3% and because it's going into a savings account, she's earning that money, okay? So that if we're starting with 100%, it's going to be increasing by 3%, which means we have 103% going in there. Now, to convert this to a multiplier, we go from a percentage to a decimal, so we're going to divide by 100, and that gives us 1.03. So I've got 2,500 multiplied by 1.03, and that is going to be to the power of 3 years. So I'm going to use my calculator for this. 2,500 multiplied by 1.03, and that is going to be cubed. Now, you've got a cube button there. If it was to more years, we could also press that, where we can type in whichever index we like. And we get 2731.8175. Now, because this is money, I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places, so £2,731 and 82 pence. This is a question that's similar to the one that we've just seen, okay, but we've got some different rates, okay. So Peter has £20,000 to invest in a saving account. Peter's doing very well for himself. he finds information about 2 saving accounts. And the first one is a bonus saver. So for the first year, he earns 4% and then 1.5% each year after that. Okay, this is something that you find quite often. They'll give you a big interest rate to try and get you to save with them with the hope that you won't move around later. The other is 2.5% each year. So for this one, for the bonus saver, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to write both out. So the bonus saver, I'm going to have 2 multipliers. So the first one I'll work out as 104%, which gives me a multiplier of 1.04. And then for every year after that, it's 1.5%. So my multiplier there will be 1.015. So for the bonus saver, the calculation that I'll carry out is 20,000 multiplied by 1.04 multiplied by 1.015. And for the fixed rate, it's going to be 20,000 multiplied by 1.025, and because it's for 2 years there, I'm going to do it to the power of 2. Okay, so I'm going to use my calculator to work out each of these, and again I will round it to 2 decimal places. Make sure you press the right buttons when you're doing this as well. Okay, and so that there gives me £21,112. Make sure you put a pound sign on. And here, 20,000 multiplied by 1.025 squared. That gives £21,012.50. Okay. Now the question does say which of these savings accounts should he choose. Well, he should choose the one that's going to give him the most money. Okay, so bonus saver. Make sure that you finish it off with that final line. Okay. Right. Next up, we've got an angles question. So here it says ABCDE is a regular pentagon. Okay, now this word regular is really important because what that's telling us is that all of the angles and all of the sides are equal. And ACFG is a square, and it wants us to work out the size of angle DCF. So DCF is that angle there that I need to calculate. Okay, so first of all, I've got a pentagon. And what I need to do is I need to work out the size of the angle of a pentagon. Now, there's various ways you can do this. If you can't remember any formulae, then you can always just count upwards, okay? And by that, I mean, if you know that a triangle is 180, then after that, you're adding 180 degrees every time you add a side, okay? Another one might also be to use exterior angles sum to 360, work out the exterior, then you can work out the interior. Okay, so pentagon, the sum of the angles in a pentagon is 540. So to find one angle, because all 5 are equal, I'm just going to divide it by 5. So each angle is 108 degrees. So I know that that's 108. I know that all of this is 108, and so on. Each one 108. Now, what I've also got here, I'm going to label this one as well, is I know that this is a square, so I know this whole thing is 90. But what I don't know about is how to split this up. Now, because it's a regular pentagon, that means I've got these sides are equal, okay? So this side is equal to the length of this. And here what we've got is we've got a triangle, okay? So that triangle is going to help us find the angle, okay? So the sum of the triangles is 180. So 180 minus 108 is 72 degrees, okay? Now, sum of these two angles together. So if I divide it by 2, because it is an isosceles triangle due to having 2 sides of equal length, I get that that angle there is 36, as is that angle there, okay? So that also tells me that here is my 90 degree angle. This is all 108. Now, if this part of the angle is 36, then I can do 108 minus 36, which gives me 72. So that tells me that this actual part of the angle there is 72 degrees. And because I know that this sums to 90 altogether, if I do 90 minus 72. That gives me 18 degrees for angle DCF. Okay, so that is a question on angles. Right, so a couple of circle questions. Okay, first one, it says OAB is a sector of a circle, centre 0. Okay, so it's like a piece of pizza's been cut correctly from the bottom and taken out. So this is our sector. And the radius of the circle is 15 centimetres. The angle of the sector is 30 degrees. And it wants us to calculate the area of this sector. So straight away, what I think about is the area. Sorry, Mr. Bowden's looking at me very strangely through a window. He's a very strange man. So circle area, that is what I need, okay? And the area of a circle is pi multiplied by the radius squared. So it's really important that you decide whether you need to use area or circumference. Now, because I've only been given a sector of the circle, okay, I don't need to know the area of the full circle. What I need is to find just this portion of it, okay? So all I need is 30 degrees out of the 360 degrees total that it is, okay? So whenever you're calculating the area of a circle sector, just remember you've got your full circle there, and then you've got the angle of it that you're trying to find, because it's out of 360 and we only need 30 degrees. I know that the radius is 15, so actually I'm going to substitute that in as well. So 30 out of 360 multiplied by pi multiplied by 15 squared. Okay, and if I use my calculator, just remember to scroll across. So multiplied by pi multiplied by 15 squared. And that gives, I'm just going to press this button. So that gives me 58.90486. And the question asks me to give my answer correct to 3 significant figures. So 1, 2, 3. So is that 9 going to stay the same, or is it going to change? Well, because it's followed by a 0, it stays the same. Remember that it's area, so it's going to be centimetres squared. So that is for the area of a sector. What we also have here is a pond, okay? The pond is also very conveniently in the shape of a sector of a circle. And Toby is going to put edging on the perimeter of the pond, okay? So it's really important here. We've just done something where we needed to use the area of the circle because it's talking about the perimeter, and the reason it's called perimeter instead of circumference that we usually use is because it's got straight edges, okay? But if I'm doing something with perimeter, then I do need to use the distance around the outside of the circle, okay, or the sector. So for this, I'm going to make sure that I use pi multiplied by the diameter. Now, to find the length of this arc, okay, again, I'm going to use a similar method to last time because I've got 105 degrees out of a total of 360, and that is the fraction I need of this circle. Now, the formula I'm using is pi multiplied by the diameter, okay, so I'm still just going to find that fraction, and I just need to work out my diameter. So the radius is 2.45. So if I multiplied that by 2, I get 4.9. Okay. So I'm going to work out this arc length. So again, using the fraction button, 105 over 360 multiplied by pi multiplied by 4.9. Okay. So that tells me that this arc length here is 4.489501. Okay, now I've also got, the thing is with this, I've got to remember that that's my arc length, but I need the full perimeter. He wouldn't want to just fence his arc length now, would he? Okay, so I need to add these two straight edges back on. So I need to add another 4.9 to that. So when I add 4.9, it gives me 9.389859501. Okay, and that's how many meters. Okay, so I've worked out the perimeter of this sector. Now it says edging is sold in lengths of 1.75 meters. Okay, so I need to work out how many lengths he's going to need. So I'm going to divide this by 1.75. Okay, so I'm dividing that by 1.75. And that gives me that he's going to need 5.4 Okay, so in this case, he's going to need 6 lengths. And each length costs £3.49. So what I'm going to do now is calculate 6 multiplied by £3.49, which gives a total of £20.94. Okay, so that is the cost for Toby to put some edging around his pond. Just going to do a couple more questions. So here we've got a fish tank sprung a leak and loses 45% of its water. There is now 363 litres of water in the fish tank. How much water was in the fish tank before the leak? Okay, so what we're trying to find is the original amount. Okay, this might be known also as a reverse percentage. Okay, so if we started off with 100% and it's lost 45%, that means we've got 55% remaining. Okay, and that 55% represents 363 litres of water. So this line of working is really important. So 55% represents 363 litres. Okay, we want to know the original amount, so I want to get back to 100%. Now, there's various ways you can do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find what 1% is. So to find 1%, because I've got 55%, I need to divide by 55. Okay, and I'm going to do that to both sides of my calculation. So 363 divided by 55, and that gives 6.6. So to find 100%, because there's 100 ones that make 100, I'm going to multiply both sides of my calculation now by 100. Okay, and that gives 660. So the original amount was 660 litres. Okay, I think we are nearly out of time. I'm just going to very quickly grab the constructions question. Okay, thanks to whoever asked for this. Really appreciate it. So the question says, shade the region inside the rectangle which is closer to AD than DC and less than 4 centimetres from D. So I'm going to tackle that bit first where it says less than 4 centimetres from D. Because D's a point here, I need anything that's 4 centimetres. I need to show that region, okay? And the way that we do that is using our compass and drawing a circle, okay? Now I'm only bothered about the part inside the rectangle, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my compass point on D. I've got the shakes today, sorry. And I am going to draw all the points, okay? Now, if, say, I wanted more of this, I would do it the whole way around, okay? Now it says, which is closer to AD than DC, okay? So I want everything that's closer to this line than to that line, okay? Now, this is sometimes missed in an exam question, because if it was drawn like this, if you were asked to bisect the angle, that would seem more straightforward. So what we're going to do here now is we're actually going to bisect the angle, and what's really important is that we don't move how wide open we've got our compass. Now actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this line that I've already drawn to help me with that, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my compass point here, all right? And I'm going to draw an arc going inwards. And I'm going to do the same on the other side of the intersection, okay? Making sure you don't change how far open your compass is. I am now going to draw a line going from that corner there through my bisector, and I'm going to keep it going, okay? So the question originally asked me to shade the region inside the rectangle, which is closer to AD, so closer to this line than to this line, and less than 4 centimetres from D, so it's got to be underneath here. So the region that I'm going to shade is this part there. Just the other thing that you could get with one of these questions, it might be the perpendicular bisector of a line. So for example, if I've got 2 points here, I've got A and B. or I might just have a line, or it might be halfway between 2 points. To do the perpendicular bisector, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my compass, I'm going to put my compass point on one end, and I'm going to open about 3/4 of the length of the line. Okay, now what I'm going to do from there is a nice big semicircle, and then leaving my compass the same distance open, I'm going to put it at the other end of the line, and I'm going to do another nice big semicircle. Okay, and then to finish it off, to bisect this line, I'm going to draw a straight line through my 2 intersections, and what it should be doing is using the pencil, not the compass, it should be cutting the line in half, hopefully, and at 90-degree angles. Okay, if you've got any more questions, or you've got any particular questions that you'd like to be covered, please do send us a message with it on. Okay, send it now as well. Choose your most annoying topics, because Mr. Starkey and Mr. Sanders are doing it now. So anything to wind them two up, really. Make sure you get a good night's sleep tonight. And just think about how positive the first 2 papers have gone, at least for the majority I know. And just follow that through for tomorrow, because, you know, you've done really, really well. So really show them what you've got, and just keep pushing, because it's nearly all over. Right, thank you.